Before I begin, I would like you to just close your eyes for a moment. And while you do this, I want you to think about your gender. That is how you feel inside that tells you that you're a man or a woman. So now that I have you thinking about your gender identity, imagine that your physical body doesn't match your gender. Think about how this incongruence would feel. And think about how many times a day this could impact your life. Maybe meeting new people, or even when you use the washroom. How safe do you feel? So open your eyes. This activity is just a glimpse into how a transgender person feels. Someone who is transgender is diagnosed with experiencing gender dysphoria. Dysphoria simply means that you're in a constant state of sadness or restlessness. And in a trans person's case, this is a misalignment between how a person feels and how the world sees them. Everyday trans people deal with their body not matching their brain, and it affects things that non-trans people often take for granted. Something as simple as filling out a medical form or even interacting with people every day can be a situation for them being outed. Even using a public washroom can cause a great deal of anxiety. In fact, many trans people frequently go a whole day of school or work without using the washroom, out of fear that they will experience some sort of verbal or physical harassment. And they frequently do. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that being alive while being trans is dangerous. You run the risk of being murdered for who you are, discriminated against with little to no legal recourse, or left without adequate health care. Now, that's not to say there's no hope. There has been a greater awareness of trans issues in the last 5, even 10 years. And that's equated to a wider acceptance and more explicit campaigns to fight transphobia. For example, Nova Scotia, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, and Newfoundland have all recently added gender identity to their human rights acts. And although this is a great start, the issues are far from being resolved. Discrimination, prejudice, and harassment is still a very real thing in the trans community. And I say this for a few reasons. Firstly, if we look at the media, it continuously misgenders and misrepresents trans people's stories, and usually looks at trans people with a fascinating freak show undertone. Similarly, TV shows and movies constantly treat transgender people like a punchline. And in making trans people the butt of jokes, it sends a message to the viewers that trans identities are something to be laughed at or ridiculed, rather than taken seriously and respected. Rarely will you ever see an article or a movie that portrays trans people as human beings with real lives and identities. The most worrisome issue is the impact on mental health. A 2013 Transpulse Ontario survey found that 77% of trans respondents had seriously considered suicide, and 45% had attempted suicide. Now, this number seems to be consistent no matter which province or even state that you look at. In fact, this is the highest number for any single population. But I do feel like there are steps that we can take to reach people, and the sooner that we reach them, the better. I support education on sexual orientation and gender identity beginning in elementary school, and then naturally being integrated into other areas of study so that LGBT and queer people are seen as and feel like equal contributors in every area of life. I also think that we can make a world where trans teachers and administrators are out of the closet with no threat of losing their job because of their identity, and that they feel confident that there is support, education, and training for their straight and non-trans school personnel. I also support LGBT and queer functions and organizations in every school. Schools shouldn't be congratulated for having supportive organizations, but rather they should be mandatory, and schools should be recognized for having a better resource than another school. When we get down to it, trans people need to feel safe in our communities, and we all know the basics for achieving feelings of safety. What we need to do is invest more in education, jobs, and housing for trans people, because clearly the structure that we have right now isn't working. And I think that these things are all connected. They are all part of a larger pattern of systemic violence against trans people, and they are part of a larger system that rejects the humanity of trans people. So what do we need? Well, we need your help. But nobody can do this alone. What we're asking for is your solidarity and your willingness to work with us for a better world. A world where no one is murdered for being trans. A world in which no trans person has to fear going to a doctor, afraid of going to school, or being in school, afraid of being unemployed, finding a home, or entering a new relationship, afraid of being alive. Together, we can make a world where every day a trans person can wake up, look in the mirror, and not have to be proud because they survived another day. They should be able to look in the mirror and feel proud beyond their survival. They should be respected, recognized, and valued as people.